Imagine meeting the love of your life, eloping, and getting married. It's a fantasy that many teenage girls dream of. For Caroline Crouch, a young high school student, that fantasy became a reality when she met a charming 27-year-old pilot who swept her off her feet. He was financially well off, and his grand romantic gestures, like flying his helicopter over her school, left her smitten. The two eloped and got married, and it seemed like the perfect fairy tale love story. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. On Tuesday, May 11, 2021, at 4:30 a.m., a horrific incident shook the quiet suburbs of Glyka, a picturesque area on the outskirts of Athens, Greece. Haralambos Anagnostopoulos, also known as Babis, was brutally awakened from his sleep by three masked men who stormed into his two-story maisonette. The men, armed with pistols and concealing their identities with hoods, quickly overpowered Babis, tying him up and blindfolding him with duct tape. As the intruders turned their attention to his 19-year-old wife Caroline, their 11-month-old daughter was startled awake, witnessing the terrifying scene unfold. The men, with thick Greek and Albanian accents, repeatedly demanded to know where the money was. Caroline, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold, tried to comply, but what seemed like a robbery would soon turn into a heinous murder that would shock the world. Caroline Crouch was born on July 12, 2001, in Athens, to retired engine engineer David Crouch and Susan Della Cuesta. When she was just 8 years old, the family relocated to the idyllic island of Alonissos, where she spent most of her childhood. The coastal surroundings had captivated both David and Susan, and Caroline grew up embracing the laid-back beachside lifestyle. She developed a passion for scuba diving and swimming, and her love for the ocean seemed to match the depth of her love for her husband Babis. But little did she know, her life was about to take a drastic turn, one that would leave her family, friends, and the entire world in utter shock. It was a Good Friday parade in 2017 when Caroline's life took a dramatic turn. That's where she met her future husband Babis, a charming commercial helicopter pilot. Caroline was just 15 years old at the time and Babis was 27. 3 years later, on July 15, 2019, the couple tied the knot in Portugal. Just days before her tragic murder, Caroline and Babis had purchased a plot of land where they planned to build their dream home for themselves and their infant daughter. To facilitate the purchase, Caroline's parents had gifted her 50,000 euros. As for the construction costs, the couple had stashed away around 10,000 euros in their house. In Greece, where the banking system was unstable and faced continuous risk of bankruptcy, it was common for people to keep cash at home, deeming it a safer option. Caroline likely shared this perspective, never anticipating the horror that would unfold on May 11th. That fateful night, Babis, Caroline, and their 11-month-old daughter were tormented with fear as the intruders demanded to know where the money was hidden. In a desperate attempt to end the nightmare, Babis told them exactly where the cash was stashed, in a rather unconventional location. The intruders opened the Monopoly board game box and snatched the money, but they didn't stop there. They roamed from room to room, grabbing jewelry and other valuable items. The looters wanted more, but Babis and Caroline had given up all they had. In desperation and fear, they begged for their lives, and that of their daughter. Babis could hear his wife's screams as the intruders held a firearm against their 11-month-old infant. Although blindfolded, he fought continuously against the restraints, but the rope around his neck was tightened to the extent that he kept fainting in and out of consciousness. Eventually, he fainted and then regained his senses after a while. When he came to, he discovered that the men had left the house. The only sound he could hear was the painful crying of his infant daughter. In about 30 minutes, Babis managed to get close to his mobile phone and dial emergency services using his nose. As soon as the call connected, he cried out for help, asking emergency services to send an ambulance and give them his location. As Babis lay helpless, duct tape covering his mouth, he managed to make a desperate call to emergency services. The operator on the other end struggled to understand his muffled words, but all Babis could muster was a faint whisper. Robbers came in. An hour and a half had passed since the intruders had broken into his and Caroline's residence, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. First responders arrived at the scene around 6 o'clock in the morning, racing up the front steps to enter the house. What they saw was nothing short of horrific. The living space and kitchen had been completely ransacked, with drawers open and empty, clothing and belongings scattered everywhere. Among the chaos, an open Monopoly box lay on the floor, a haunting reminder of the stash of money that had been hidden inside. A security camera, ripped from the wall, sat on the living room couch, its memory card missing. As they made their way upstairs, they found the lifeless body of a white and brown husky puppy, strangled with her own leash. Babis was discovered on the floor of the main bedroom, his eyes and mouth covered in duct tape, his hands and feet bound behind his back. On the bed, Caroline lay face down, her infant daughter crying and clapping beside her, trying to rouse her mother from her eternal slumber. Caroline was declared dead, her pale skin a testament to the brutal murder that had taken place. Babis was overcome with grief when he was finally freed from his restraints and saw the lifeless body of his wife, the woman he had loved for the past 5 years. The officers quickly ensured the safety of the infant and began to interrogate Babis, piecing together the events of the crime scene. Based on his account and the state of the house, police officers concluded that 4 men had been involved in the heinous crime, 3 had entered the house, while the 4th kept watch. The investigation revealed that 1 intruder had approached the house through a dirt road that led to its rear entrance. 2 others had entered through the front door, while the 4th had remained outside keeping watch. The sequence of events was chilling. The intruders had broken in, tied up Babis, and then turned their attention to Caroline, ultimately leading to her tragic murder. As the police delved deeper into the case, they reconstructed the events of that fateful night. The intruders had first attempted to break in through the rear door, but failed. They then removed the security pins from a basement window and entered the house. Their first victim was Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, whom they brutally murdered with her own leash. The 3 men then made their way to the main bedroom where Babis and Caroline were asleep. They damaged the house, took the money from the Monopoly box, and before leaving, they smothered Caroline to death with a pillow. Babis, who was drifting in and out of consciousness, may have been assumed dead by the intruders, who left believing they had left no witnesses behind. The investigation revealed that Caroline's death was not an instant experience. The 20-year-old woman suffered a prolonged attack that lasted around 6 minutes. Bruises on her body showed signs of retaliation, and those on her lips and tongue hinted at the possibility of sharp objects being used. Fortunately, no signs of sexual assault were found. Despite the extensive damage to the couple's house, the intruders left behind no concrete evidence. The only clue was a hood found by emergency responders, which was believed to have fallen off during Babis's retaliation. This small piece of evidence, combined with Babis's description, led to the creation of a sketch depicting an overweight, dark-skinned, tall individual. Babis, although disoriented, was able to identify 2 firearms used by the intruders, a black pistol and a silver Colt. The investigation revealed that the intruders escaped with 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry worth 20,000 euros. Police concluded that this was an act of professional criminals who had observed the family and waited for the right moment to strike. A police spokesperson described the crime as brutal and violent, and categorized it as an act of someone with a lack of emotions and a strong antisocial personality. As the investigation provided more insight into the murder, numerous speculations followed. As the investigation unfolded, a key question lingered in everyone's mind. If money was the motive, why was murder necessary? Some speculated that the intruders were high on drugs and lost control, while others believed Caroline might have seen or known them, leading to a violent confrontation. Given her background as a black belt kickboxer, it was possible that Caroline resisted and fought back, forcing the intruders to silence her. While these theories swirled, the investigators were certain about one thing: the attack was premeditated. The reason for this assumption was that the intruders knew the couple had money hidden in the house. Based on this, the police questioned Babis and those in Caroline's inner circle, suspecting that the gang had received a tip. Alongside these interrogations, security camera footage from nearby homes and businesses was examined. The police identified a dark-colored vehicle followed by a motorcycle cruising around the couple's house on the morning of the murder. Caroline's funeral. 3 days after the murder, Caroline Crouch was laid to rest on the Greek island of Alonissos, a place she grew up and where her parents had fallen in love. Babis paid tribute to his wife, saying he was lucky to have met her, and even more fortunate that she loved him and was the mother of their daughter. He added that their daughter would grow up not remembering her mother, but Caroline would always be near him through their child. A break in the case. As Caroline was being laid to rest, a car was pulled over in northeast Greece during a routine stop. Inside was a 36-year-old Georgian national, Georgi Harajishvili, who was on his way to the Bulgarian border. He had handed over his passport, but it was soon identified as a fake. Who was this man, and how was he related to Caroline's murder? The investigation soon revealed that he was a violent criminal with multiple prior convictions. A suspect emerges. As the investigation continued, a suspect emerged, Georgi Harajishvili, a 36-year-old Georgian national with a history of violent break-ins. He was wanted for 12 break-ins committed all over Athens in the past 6 months. What made him a prime suspect was the fact that 3 of these crimes were committed around Babis and Caroline's neighborhood. One of these break-ins occurred in December, when Vili and 3 others broke into a house through a rear window similar to the modus operandi used in the Crouch murder. During that robbery, they dragged the female occupant by the hair and threatened to slit her throat, making off with 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry. Their next hit was on March 7th, just 2 months before Babis and Caroline became their targets. In that robbery, they tied up 4 people, including an older couple and their cleaning lady, and stole cash and other valuable items. If the pattern of violence wasn't enough to implicate Vili, his physical appearance matched the sketch created using Babis's description of the intruder. The evidence against him was mounting: a history of violent break-ins, an attempt to flee the country, and a resemblance to the sketch. The police were confident they had found their man. Vili was arrested and interrogated for 4 days, during which physical means were used to extract answers. He was repeatedly questioned about getting to the location, entering the house, and killing Caroline. However, despite the intense questioning, Vili maintained his innocence, claiming he had never heard of Caroline Crouch. The physical means used to get answers left him concussed, but he refused to crack. In the end, the evidence against him came up dry, and Vili was cleared of any involvement in the murder. As a consequence of the botched investigation, 3 police officers were demoted from the Athens homicide squad. The police refocused their efforts, setting their sights on a local Albanian organized crime group. Initially, they had a list of 100 people, which was later narrowed down to 10 individuals known as the Red List. These individuals were known criminals with a history of violent crimes. As the investigation dragged on, the police showed Babis mugshots of potential suspects, but refused to reveal any further details. The case was taking longer than usual to solve, and the public was growing increasingly frustrated. With racial tensions on the rise, the lack of progress in Caroline's case was particularly concerning. Even a substantial monetary reward went unclaimed, and residents of Athens were living in fear, wondering who would be the next victim. Media reports at the time cited experts saying that this was no ordinary case, and if it were, it would have been solved by now. The investigation was hampered by a lack of DNA or fingerprints, making it even more challenging to catch the killer. Caroline's family, however, remained grateful for the continued pursuit of justice. Babis told journalists that he wished no one else would have to go through what he was experiencing, and he continued to front the media to keep Caroline's case alive. A breakthrough. Then, on June 17th, 37 days after Caroline's brutal murder, a breakthrough came. A small memorial service was being held for her on the island of Alonissos. As those who had come to mourn gathered, they noticed a detective in attendance. The investigators waited until the event had concluded and then discreetly approached Babis, asking him to accompany them to Athens. They had new information about the case and urged Babis to come and identify the man. New leads and inconsistencies. By this time, the investigators had followed up on numerous leads and analyzed key details from the night of Caroline's murder. However, some of these details didn't add up. Babis had told the police that the intruders broke in through the basement window, but that window was too small for the supposed killer's physique. Additionally, Babis claimed that the house had been trashed by the intruders, but the neighbors reported hearing nothing of the sort. The only sounds that night were of a couple's puppy crying in distress. No house being trashed, no calls for help, and no crying infant. Inconsistencies and new revelations. As the investigation continued, the lack of fingerprints and DNA evidence at the crime scene only added to the mystery. The question of why the intruders would tie up a male and fight a female remained unanswered. Babis had claimed that the intruders must have removed the memory card from the living room security camera, but data from the camera revealed that the card was removed at 1:20 a.m., a few hours before the criminals had supposedly entered the house. New evidence emerges. Further details emerge that Caroline was wearing a smartwatch that monitored her pulse. Her pulse readings from 3:58 a.m. indicated she was asleep, but the ones at 4:05 a.m. showed a 50% increase, indicating severe physical and mental stress. The readings at 4:11 a.m. revealed that her heart had stopped before the time Babis had claimed the murder took place. Meanwhile, Babis had a fitness app on his smartphone, which showed that he was moving around during the time he was supposed to be tied up. The police had also tried to reenact Babis dialing emergency services with his phone, but no one was able to do so. Investigations revealed that Caroline had attempted to book a hotel for herself and her daughter on the night she was killed. A text message sent to her friend also revealed that she was threatening to leave Babis. As the police dug deeper, they uncovered a more complex and troubled relationship between Babis and Caroline. Babis had met Caroline while on holiday in Alonisos, where his mother lived and worked as a teacher at Caroline's school. Babis was charismatic, clever, and loved to take photos, and he was well off financially. He gained Caroline's attention by flying a helicopter over her school, a romantic gesture that most teenage girls would dream of. But in Caroline's case, this dream would soon turn into a nightmare. Caroline thought they were the perfect match, and took her family into confidence, telling them she was happy. Babis proposed to Caroline a year and a half into their relationship, when she was still underage. She turned 18 just 3 days later, and the couple exchanged vows and settled in Glyfada. In the initial years of their marriage, Caroline attended college in Athens, while Babis continued working as a pilot. Both of them were active on social media, sharing the happy life they were living. From their social media handles, the couple appeared to be in a joyful relationship filled with love and romance, but behind the facade, a darker truth was emerging. The dark truth revealed. Caroline's diary told a story that belonged to a completely different genre. In its pages, she often questioned her relationship with Babis, revealing a tumultuous and troubled partnership. In 2019, she wrote about fighting with Babis, describing the fights as serious and intense. She had mentioned that she was planning on leaving him and going to her sister, unsure if she could continue with him throughout their marriage. A pattern of manipulation. Babis had become increasingly manipulative and controlling, a behavior that was rooted back in their non-traditional wedding. When they eloped, it may have seemed like a romantic gesture, but in reality, it was an attempt to isolate Caroline. This isolation continued when they returned home, with Babis being the only one who put food on the table, while Caroline was just a university student without much money. Even the financial support from her mother, Susan, would be taken by Babis. A cry for help. In her diary, Caroline wrote, "I love Babis so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." The diary also revealed details of a tearful confrontation with her husband, where she mentioned that she wanted to leave Babis, but couldn't because she was pregnant. She wrote, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." Another entry, dated July 2020, read, "Today, my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Babis I want to leave. I feel awful." A descent into despair. The diary also mentioned a house in Athens located in Halandri, which seemed to symbolize the fairy tale love story that had turned into an abyss of pain, horror, and despair. Caroline felt estranged and trapped in a relationship that she couldn't escape, one that would eventually consume her. Phone records from hours before her murder revealed argumentative and combative texts with Babis, while they were at home together. serving as a testament to how distant and dysfunctional their relationship had become. The investigators told Babis that he was the new suspect in the murder case, presenting him with overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that revealed the inconsistencies with the details he had initially shared. The game was up, and Babis's facade of innocence was about to crumble. After 8 hours of intense interrogation, Babis finally broke down and began to confess. But his confession was laced with fabrication, a desperate attempt to shift the blame and justify his heinous crime. Babis told the police that he and Caroline started arguing on May 10th, the night before she was killed. He claimed that the couple only fought over their daughter, and that Caroline was determined to take her and leave. This, he said, had made him lose control, given that he claimed the child was his whole life. A distorted version of events. Babis went on to describe the events of that fateful night, painting a distorted picture of Caroline as the aggressor. He claimed that she had thrown their infant child in the cot and told him to leave the house. He alleged that Caroline was the one who resorted to physical abuse, pushing and punching him. According to Babis, this had clouded his judgment, leading him to lash out and commit the brutal murder. A chilling account. Babis's confession was a chilling account of a cold-blooded murder. He described how he had strangled Caroline, pressed a pillow on her face using his complete body weight, and killed her in front of their 11-month-old child. He admitted to thinking about getting rid of the body but knew it wouldn't be possible. Instead, he staged a home invasion, killing Roxy, the family dog, and placing his own child next to Caroline's corpse. He even tied himself up with rope and duct tape to make it look like he was a victim. A pathetic attempt to shift blame. Throughout his confession, Babis tried to shift the blame onto Caroline, claiming that he had become unstable and aggressive after the birth of their child. He expressed remorse, saying he deserved to be punished and owed a big apology to everyone he'd hurt, but his words rang hollow, a pathetic attempt to justify his brutal actions. Justice served. The case was later dubbed the murder that fooled the world. Babis had become so confident about getting away with the murder that he didn't bother to destroy key evidence. In May 2022, he was charged and found guilty of premeditated murder, preventing the course of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the family and friends of Caroline, but it would never bring back the vibrant young woman who was brutally killed by the man